He said I was the love of his life, his soulmate, the woman he had been searching for his entire existence. But at the same time, he was lying to me every single day, building an empire of deception that would eventually crush my soul into 1,000 pieces. I still remember the exact moment I met Marcus. It was a rainy Thursday evening in October, and I was running late to meet my friends at this little coffee shop downtown. My umbrella had broken, my hair was a mess, and I felt completely frazzled. That's when I literally bumped into him. This tall, handsome man with the most piercing blue eyes I had ever seen. He caught me as I stumbled, and for a moment, time stood still. He smiled at me with such warmth, such genuine concern, and said, "Are you okay, beautiful? You look like you've had quite the adventure with this storm." Something about the way he said it, the way he looked at me like I was the most precious thing he had ever encountered, made my heart skip a beat. He insisted on buying me a coffee to warm me up, and before I knew it, we were sitting by the window, talking for hours. Marcus had this incredible ability to make me feel like I was the only person in the room, the only person that mattered in the entire world. He listened to every word I said with such intensity, asked follow-up questions about my dreams, my fears, my childhood memories. He seemed genuinely fascinated by everything about me. That night, he walked me to my car despite the pouring rain, and as we stood there under the streetlight, he gently tucked a strand of wet hair behind my ear and said, "I know this might sound crazy, but I feel like I've been waiting my whole life to meet you." My heart melted completely. When he kissed me goodnight, it felt like every romantic movie I had ever watched, every love song I had ever heard, finally made sense. The next few months were absolute magic. Marcus showered me with attention like I had never experienced before. He would text me good morning every single day with these beautiful, poetic messages about how grateful he was to have me in his life. He would show up at my workplace with my favorite flowers, white roses, just because he said he couldn't stop thinking about me. He remembered every little detail I shared with him, how I liked my coffee, my favorite author, the story about my childhood dog, the way I felt insecure about my laugh. Marcus made me feel like a princess, like I was worthy of the kind of love I had only read about in novels. He would plan these elaborate romantic dates, picnics under the stars, surprise weekend trips to cozy bed and breakfasts, candlelit dinners at home where he would cook my favorite meals. He told me I was different from every other woman he had ever met, that I was pure, genuine, and had this light inside me that made him want to be a better man. "You're going to be my wife someday," he would whisper in my ear as we lay in bed together. "I'm going to give you the most beautiful wedding, and we're going to have 3 children, 2 boys and a girl. We'll have this perfect little house with a white picket fence and a big backyard where our kids can play. I'm going to take care of you for the rest of your life, protect you from everything bad in this world." Those promises felt so real, so tangible. When he talked about our future together, I could actually see it. I could picture myself in a white dress walking down the aisle to him. I could imagine us decorating a nursery, growing old together on a porch swing. He painted such vivid pictures of our life together that it became my reality, my hope, my entire reason for being. Marcus introduced me to his friends, took me to family gatherings, and made me feel like I was already part of his world. His mother loved me, his sister would call me to chat, and his friends would joke about when he was finally going to propose. Everything felt so natural, so right, so destined. He would hold my hand in public and look at me with such pride, like he couldn't believe I was his. "Look at this incredible woman I found," he would say to anyone who would listen. "Isn't she amazing?" For my birthday, 6 months into our relationship, Marcus surprised me with a weekend trip to the mountains. He had rented this beautiful cabin overlooking a lake, and he had planned every detail perfectly. There were candles everywhere, my favorite wine, a playlist of all the songs that had become ours. That night, as we sat by the fireplace, he got down on one knee, not to propose, but to give me a promise ring. It was a simple silver band with a small heart engraved on it. "This is my promise to you," he said, slipping it onto my finger with tears in his eyes. "My promise that you are my forever. My promise that I will love you until my last breath. My promise that you will never have to doubt my commitment to you. I know we haven't been together long, but I know with absolute certainty that you are the woman I want to spend my life with." I cried happy tears that night. I felt so chosen, so loved, so secure in our relationship. Marcus held me close and whispered all these beautiful things about our future, about how lucky he was to have found me, about how he was going to spend the rest of his life making me happy. I fell asleep in his arms, feeling like the most blessed woman in the world. But looking back now, I realize that's when the first small red flags started appearing. Flags that I completely ignored because I was so intoxicated by his love, so blinded by the fairy tale he was creating for us. It started with little things that seemed almost endearing at the time. Marcus began showing up at my apartment unannounced, saying he just couldn't stay away from me, that he missed me too much. At first I thought it was romantic. This man loves me so much that he can't bear to be apart from me. But sometimes he would show up when I had told him I was having girls' night with my friends, or when I was supposed to be working on a project for my job. "I just wanted to surprise you," he would say with that charming smile. "Is that so wrong? I thought you'd be happy to see me." And I always was happy to see him, so I pushed away the tiny voice in my head that wondered why he couldn't just respect my plans. Then there were the questions. Marcus became increasingly curious about my day-to-day activities. At first, his interest felt like genuine care. He wanted to know about my work, my friends, my family. But gradually, the questions became more detailed, more persistent. Where exactly did I go for lunch? Who was I texting? Why was I smiling at my phone? What did my coworker mean when he made that comment? "I'm just interested in your life, baby," he would say when I occasionally expressed that I felt overwhelmed by all his questions. "I love you so much that I want to know everything about your world. Is that bad?" Most women would be thrilled to have a man who cares this much. He had a way of making me feel guilty for even mildly questioning his behavior. When I mentioned that maybe he was being a little too intense about knowing my whereabouts, he would get this hurt look in his eyes and say something like, "I thought you loved me as much as I love you. I thought we were building something real together. If you need space from me, just say so." The thought of hurting him, of pushing away the best thing that had ever happened to me, was unbearable. Marcus also started making subtle comments about my friends and family. He never outright said he didn't like them, but he would plant these little seeds of doubt. "Did you notice how Sarah seemed a little jealous when you were talking about us? I think she's unhappy in her own relationship and she doesn't want to see you happy." Or, "Your mom seemed really critical of you tonight. I don't like the way she talks to you sometimes. You deserve so much better than that." At the time, I thought he was just being protective, that he could see things I was too close to notice. I started viewing my relationships through his lens, and gradually, I began spending less time with the people who had been important to me before Marcus came into my life. I told myself it was natural. When you're in love, you want to spend all your time with that person. But the truth was, being around others started to feel stressful because I knew Marcus would want to dissect every interaction afterward. The most confusing part was how inconsistent his behavior became. Some days, Marcus would be the same loving, attentive, romantic man I had fallen for. He would surprise me with my favorite meal, write me beautiful notes, tell me how much I meant to him. But other days, he would be distant, cold, almost like he was punishing me for something I couldn't identify. When I would ask what was wrong, he would say, "Nothing, I'm fine." But his body language and tone suggested otherwise. He would give me short, clipped answers, barely look at me, act like my presence was bothering him. These episodes would last for days sometimes, and I would find myself walking on eggshells, desperately trying to figure out what I had done wrong and how I could fix it. Then, just when I was starting to feel hopeless and confused, Marcus would snap back to his loving self. He would apologize, saying he had been stressed about work or family issues, and he would love bomb me all over again. "I'm so sorry, baby. I've just been overwhelmed with everything going on. You didn't deserve that. You're the best thing in my life, and I don't know what I'd do without you." Those reconciliations were intoxicating. The relief I felt when he was loving again, the gratitude I experienced when he chose to be kind to me, created this addictive cycle. The highs felt so high because the lows had been so confusing and painful. I found myself working harder and harder to avoid triggering his cold phases, constantly monitoring my behavior, my words, even my facial expressions. I started noticing that Marcus had different rules for himself than he had for me. He could disappear for hours without explanation, but if I didn't respond to his text within 20 minutes, he would bombard me with messages asking where I was and what I was doing. He could cancel our plans last minute for work or friends, but if I had to reschedule because of a family obligation, he would act hurt and abandoned. "I just don't understand why your family is more important than me," he would say. "I thought we were building a life together. I thought I was your priority. The guilt would eat me alive. Here was this man who loved me more than anyone ever had, and I was disappointing him, failing him, not being the girlfriend he deserved. Marcus also began making comments about my appearance that confused me. He would compliment me lavishly in private, telling me I was the most beautiful woman he had ever seen, but in public or around others, he would make little remarks. "You might want to touch up your makeup before we go in," or, "Are you sure you want to wear that? It's a little tight." When I would express hurt about these comments, he would act shocked. "I'm just trying to help you look your best, baby. I love you so much that I want other people to see how amazing you are." I'm on your side here. Again, he made me feel like I was being overly sensitive, like I should be grateful for his guidance. The financial control started subtly too. Marcus began insisting on paying for everything, saying he wanted to take care of me, that it made him feel like a man to provide for his woman. At first it felt wonderful. I'd been struggling financially, working 2 jobs to make ends meet, so having someone step in and ease that burden felt like a blessing. But gradually, Marcus started using his financial contributions as leverage. If we got into an argument, he would remind me of everything he had paid for. "I don't ask for much, considering I pay your rent and buy your groceries," he would say during conflicts. "The least you could do is show me some appreciation and respect." He also started controlling how I spent my own money. He would question purchases I made, even small ones like a coffee or a new book. "Why did you need that? Didn't we just buy you clothes last week? Maybe you should ask me before you spend money on things you don't really need." I found myself asking his permission for smaller and smaller purchases, eventually handing over my own paycheck to him for budgeting purposes. Looking back, I can see how systematically Marcus was isolating me, controlling me, breaking down my sense of self and my independence. But at the time, I interpreted everything through the lens of love. He cared about me so much that he wanted to be involved in every aspect of my life. He loved me so much that he wanted to protect me from making bad decisions. He was so committed to our future that he wanted us to be completely united in every way. I told myself that relationships required compromise, that true love meant putting your partner's needs before your own, that the intensity of our connection was worth the occasional discomfort I felt. Besides, the good times were so good, and Marcus's love felt so rare and precious that I was terrified of losing it. The manipulation became more sophisticated and devastating as time went on. Marcus had this incredible ability to twist reality, to make me doubt my own perceptions and memories. If I confronted him about something hurtful he had said, he would deny it completely, claiming I was misremembering or taking things out of context. "I would never say that to you, baby. You know how much I love you. I think you're stressed and maybe hearing things that weren't actually said." When I would insist that I remembered correctly, he would get this concerned look and say, "I'm worried about you. You've been so anxious lately, and now you're having these false memories. Maybe you should talk to someone." He made me feel like I was losing my mind. There were conversations I was absolutely certain we had had, promises he had made, things he had said, but when I brought them up, Marcus would act like I was completely delusional. He did it so convincingly, with such apparent genuine concern for my mental state, that I began to doubt myself constantly. Marcus also became a master at turning every conflict back on me. If I expressed hurt about something he had done, he would somehow manage to make me the villain. "I can't believe you would think I would intentionally hurt you," he would say with tears in his eyes. "After everything I've done for you, everything I've given up for this relationship, you're going to attack my character like this? I'm starting to wonder if you even love me." By the end of these conversations, I would find myself apologizing to him, comforting him, reassuring him of my love, begging his forgiveness for doubting him. I became so afraid of his hurt feelings, so desperate to maintain his approval and affection, that I stopped trusting my own instincts entirely. The emotional manipulation was relentless. Marcus would withhold affection as punishment for perceived slights. If I didn't respond to his text quickly enough, or if I seemed to be enjoying myself too much with other people, or if I questioned any of his decisions, he would become cold and distant. He wouldn't touch me, wouldn't tell me he loved me, would barely acknowledge my presence. "I need some space to think about our relationship," he would say when I would desperately ask what was wrong. "I'm not sure if this is working anymore. Maybe we're too different. Maybe you don't love me the way I love you. The terror I felt during these episodes was overwhelming. The thought of losing Marcus, of losing the only person who had ever loved me so completely, made me physically sick. I would do anything, say anything, promise anything to get him back. And when he finally decided I had learned my lesson and returned to being loving, my relief and gratitude were so intense that I would completely forget about whatever had caused the conflict in the first place. Marcus used my love for him as a weapon against me. He knew exactly how deeply I cared, how much I had invested in our relationship, how terrified I was of abandonment. He wielded that knowledge with surgical precision, knowing exactly which buttons to push to get me to comply with whatever he wanted. He also began isolating me more aggressively from my support system. He would create conflicts or emergencies whenever I had plans with friends or family. Suddenly, he would be having a crisis at work, or feeling depressed, or dealing with a family issue, and he would need me to be there for him. As someone who loved him, how could I choose a girls' night over supporting my partner through a difficult time? When I did manage to spend time with others, Marcus would interrogate me afterward. What did we talk about? Did I mention our relationship problems? What did they say about him? He was particularly threatened by any friend who expressed concern about our relationship or who encouraged me to maintain my independence. Sarah has always been jealous of what we have, he would say. She's single and miserable, and she can't stand to see you happy. I think she's trying to sabotage our relationship because she wants you to be as lonely as she is. Gradually, it became easier to just decline social invitations than to deal with Marcus's reaction. I found myself becoming increasingly isolated, with him as my only real source of social contact and emotional support. This made me even more dependent on him, even more desperate to maintain his approval. The financial control intensified as well. Marcus convinced me to quit one of my jobs, saying he made enough money to support us both and that he wanted me to focus on our relationship. "I want to be able to come home to you every day," he said. "I want to know that you're here, thinking about us, planning our future together." Is that so wrong? It sounded romantic at the time, but it made me completely financially dependent on him. When I lost that job, I also lost the independence and self-confidence that came with earning my own money. I had to ask Marcus for everything: gas money, groceries, clothes, personal items. He was generous with these things, but he also made sure I knew that I was dependent on his generosity. Marcus began monitoring my phone and computer usage. He convinced me to share passwords with him, saying that complete transparency was important in a healthy relationship. "If we're going to spend our lives together, we shouldn't have any secrets from each other," he said. "I want you to have all my passwords too. I have nothing to hide from you." But while he gave me his passwords, I quickly learned that accessing his accounts would trigger huge fights. When I did look at his phone or computer, he would act betrayed and hurt. "I gave you those passwords as a gesture of trust, not so you could spy on me," he would say. "If you don't trust me, then maybe we need to reconsider this whole relationship." Meanwhile, Marcus regularly went through my messages, emails, and social media accounts. He would question me about conversations with coworkers, old friends, even family members. He had an opinion about every person I interacted with, and made it clear which relationships he approved of and which ones he found threatening to our bond. The sexual manipulation was perhaps the most confusing aspect of our relationship. In the beginning, Marcus had made me feel beautiful, desired, like I was the most attractive woman in the world. But gradually, he began using sex as another form of control. He would withdraw physical affection when he was displeased with me, then use my need for intimacy and connection to get me to comply with his demands. He also began making comments about my body that slowly eroded my self-confidence. Nothing overtly cruel, just little remarks that planted seeds of insecurity. "You've been eating a lot lately," or "maybe we should start working out together," or "that position isn't really flattering for you." Marcus had this way of making his criticism sound like loving concern. He would follow up hurtful comments with reassurances of his love, making it impossible for me to be angry without seeming ungrateful. "I only say these things because I care about you, baby. I want you to be healthy and confident. I'm trying to help you be the best version of yourself." The gaslighting reached a crescendo about 18 months into our relationship. By this point, I was completely isolated from my friends, financially dependent on Marcus, and so confused about reality that I barely trusted my own thoughts. I had become a shadow of my former self, anxious, insecure, constantly seeking his approval and validation. Marcus had convinced me that I was lucky to have him, that no one else would ever love me the way he did, that my friends and family didn't really care about me the way he did. "I'm the only one who sees the real you," he would say. "I'm the only one who loves you unconditionally. Everyone else has given up on you, but I'm still here." I believed him completely. I felt grateful for his love, desperate to keep it, terrified of doing anything that might drive him away. I had lost all sense of my own worth outside of his opinion of me. If Marcus was happy with me, I felt valuable. If he was disappointed or angry, I felt worthless. The promise ring he had given me became a symbol of both hope and chains. I would twist it around my finger whenever I felt anxious, reminding myself that this was temporary, that once we were married and had the security of that ultimate commitment, Marcus would relax and go back to being the loving man I had fallen for. I started planning our wedding in my head, imagining how beautiful it would be, how happy we would finally be once we made our love official. I dropped hints about engagement, brought up friends who were getting married, left bridal magazines around our apartment. But every time I broached the subject of taking the next step, Marcus would find a reason to delay. "I want to be in a better financial position first," he would say. Or, "I want to make sure we work out some of these issues in our relationship first." Or, "Marriage is a huge step. I want to be absolutely certain we're ready." These delays filled me with anxiety and self-doubt. What issues did we need to work out? What was I doing wrong that made him uncertain about our future? I worked even harder to be the perfect girlfriend, to prove to him that I was worthy of the forever he had promised me. But the harder I tried, the more Marcus seemed to pull away. He became increasingly critical, increasingly distant, increasingly unpredictable. The loving phases became shorter and less frequent, while the cold, punishing phases lasted longer. I found myself living in a constant state of hypervigilance, analyzing his every mood, desperately trying to anticipate his needs and avoid his displeasure. Looking back, I can see that Marcus was systematically breaking me down, destroying my self-esteem and independence so completely that I would never have the strength to leave him. He was creating a version of me that was so dependent on him, so grateful for any scrap of affection he threw my way, that I would tolerate increasingly unacceptable behavior. But at the time, I interpreted our struggles as normal relationship challenges. I thought all couples went through difficult periods, that love required sacrifice and compromise, that the intensity of our connection made us more volatile than other couples. I believed that if I could just love him better, be better, do better, we would find our way back to the happiness we had shared in the beginning. I held on to those early memories like lifelines, the way he had looked at me that first night, the promises he had made, the ring on my finger, the dreams we had built together. That version of Marcus felt more real to me than the man who was slowly destroying my soul. I convinced myself that the loving Marcus was the real Marcus, and this cruel stranger was just someone he became when he was stressed or scared of losing me.